So, hello everybody and welcome. Yes, welcome back here at BSN Network. You get back here, BSN Network. This is the BSN Network podcast here today. It is Tuesday, February 22nd. Over about 7 days so far, and a good rest of their day. Yesterday, it is in fact Tuesday, February 22nd here today, coming off another big night last night in the world of sports. Maybe not a big night, but still had some hockey on, had some college basketball on last night. I was watching a little bit of the North Carolina-Louisville game in between intermissions of the Montreal Canadiens-Toronto Maple Leafs game, which, by the way, the Canadiens played very well, got the win 5-2. Kind of surprising, and definitely for a Canadiens team that this season has not been good. They picked up their 11th win, and look, hey, the Canadiens, watch out. They're on a 3-game win streak, so, good win for the Canadiens, good win for them, obviously, to, go out and be able to, beat them, and, they had their crowd back in the arena at the Bell Center again in Montreal, so, definitely was more energy in that arena. I've watched some Canadiens games this season, and it's been like, it's kind of been like a weird, it's an eerie feeling watching those games where there's no crowd, it's pumped in crowd noise. It kind of brings you back to last year, which is not where you want to get brought back to. We all love full arenas, we all love full stadiums, we love when the crowd's into it, we all love the energy that the crowd and the fans bring every single night that your team or any team plays. So I had some hockey on last night, had some basketball as well. We saw North Carolina-Louisville. North Carolina was able to pick up a big win for them in their season. And man, watching a little bit of that game just shows us Louisville's in a very difficult spot in terms of just where their team is at, like just overall. I mean, they're in a very difficult spot. Their franchise, the program right now is in a very rough spot. It's entering a rebuild. They fired Chris Mack early in the season, and it just has not been good for them. And they've had moments of competing, and they've had moments of showing some promise, but it's been like, it's just not been good enough. And for a team that for so many years has been able to compete in the ACC, and been able to be a team that's definitely respectable, they're really struggling this season. I believe they're now like 12-15 now. So really tough again yesterday to watch that Louisville team that has been so good for a long time to now struggle so much is definitely weird as a fan to watch. So, just as a basketball fan in general. So that was on last night. No New York sports last night. For the first time, and I feel like a little bit, I feel like we've had almost at least one thing every night. Tonight, however, we got the Islanders back on tonight. They will be in Seattle to start up a West Coast trip tonight against the Kraken, and that will start 10 Eastern. Against the Kraken, who are fresh off a loss last night against the Canucks. Nets, Knicks still on the All-Star break, as we all know. Nets, Knicks, I believe the Nets resume Thursday. The Knicks, I believe, I could check right now. The Knicks, I believe, resume Friday, I think, and I am right about that. Knicks resume Friday. So, Nets have another day off. They'll be back in action Thursday coming out of the All-Star break. Rangers have another day off. They'll be back in action Thursday. Islanders on tonight against the Kraken, and the Knicks continue their All-Star break as they will be back in action on Friday against the Heat. By the way, today's February 2nd, the 22nd day of February, and it's 2022. So it's kind of funny to think about that, just as kind of an off-sports topic related thing. And the New York Jets quarterback Zach Wilson is number 2. So a whole lot of 2s today flying by. Either way. A lot to get to today on the podcast, as we all know. Another packed day. A lot of news. I mean, Aaron Rodgers news is going all over the place. We got, the Aaron Rodgers news. You got the Juwan Howard news of him getting suspended. We'll get to that. You got the Nets signing Dragic. You got, the Nets and Ben Simmons and when he's going to return. So much news to get to. So, with that being said, These are the topics that I got going for today's podcast. As it happened, it actually broke yesterday during the podcast, so had to wait all day until to talk about it again. Nets signed Goran Dragic. Yes, you have heard that right. The Brooklyn Nets have signed guard Goran Dragic after he was bought out, contract buyout from the Spurs. Obviously, he was on the Raptors, so obviously, he was on the Raptors. Then he got bought out. So a guy who really solid player, a guy who's definitely the Raptors traded him to the Spurs, who bought him out, and now he's on the Nets. So has kind of been a whirlwind of a season for Dragic, but a very solid asset, very solid bench piece. And I'm going to explain to you why I definitely really like this move, and I think this is a really solid move going forward, and specifically come playoff time and come postseason when we need minutes, and we need very good minutes from our bench, something that we have not had much of this season. Okay, so we'll get to the Nets and them signing Goran Dragic. We'll also get to Juwan Howard and his suspension. Yesterday, last night, it was announced that Juwan Howard, after the altercation with the Wisconsin coaches and his coaching staff, has been fined and suspended. So Juwan Howard is done for the rest of the regular season, which means the final, I believe, 5 games left in the regular season, he will be out. He'll serve his suspension starting tomorrow night against Rutgers. So he's out, gets suspended. Look, I agree with it. I don't think there's really any question about it. He deserves to get suspended. He took his hand and slapped, whatever you want to call it, pushed a coach in the face, slapped a coach. I wouldn't say punched, but he hit a coach in the face. However you want to say that, you hit somebody in the face in a basketball game or anywhere, you're going to get punished. So he gets, unless if it's hockey, but he's going to get punished. I agree with the punishment, and we'll get more into Michigan and Juwan Howard's situation. And also kind of just talk about their struggles, because they've not been a good team this season. So we'll get to that. We'll get to the suspension, and we'll also get to the New York sports update to finish off the podcast today. We got the Nets and Knicks are still off. Rangers still off, so Islanders tonight are the lone New York sports team out of the main ones I talk about that are in action. So they will be in action tonight against the Kraken, and even the Sabres aren't on, or the Devils. So a lot of not much going on in the metropolitan area between even up in Buffalo with the Sabres and with the Devils, and even in New York with the Rangers, Nets, Knicks, and Isles play tonight. So the Islanders will be in action tonight against the Kraken. And look, like I said, the Islanders need to get going. If they want to save their season one bit, they're going to need to find a way to get going. They're not going to make the playoffs, I don't think, but if they want to just at least make this season, they got to, if they want to try to at least make up ground, they got to win these games against the Kraken. They lost to the Canadians. Those are games on the schedules that you got to win. So we'll see what they can do tonight, later, 10 Eastern, against the Kraken. Alrighty, so a lot to get to today in the podcast. Another packed podcast ahead of us. And, with all that being said, this is the BSN podcast, and let's get right into it. Alrighty, so yesterday we got the news actually during the podcast, but Goran Dragic to sign with the Nets after contract buyout from the San Antonio Spurs. So yes, you have heard that right. The Brooklyn Nets are signing free agent veteran guard Goran Dragic, who was with the Raptors this season, only played 5 games, missed some times due to some personal issues and some personal reasons. He then got traded from the Raptors to the Spurs, did not play a single minute with the Spurs. Spurs have bought him out. He was a free agent. He was free for anyone to pick him up. The Heat were involved. The Nets were obviously involved. I'm not sure who all the other teams were involved. I think there might have been 2 or 3 other ones. I think there was about 5 or 6 total. And sure enough, Steve Nash, former teammate of Dragic, they played in Phoenix together with the Suns back in the early 2010s. I think it was back in 2008 or something around there. Now he reunites with Steve Nash in Brooklyn. This time Nash being the coach and Dragic still playing in the league. He's a veteran. He's been around for a very long time. It's kind of been a little bit of a whirlwind, kind of a wild season for Dragic. He had a really solid season last year with the Heat. A year before that, I believe in 2018, he was an all-star. Had a really nice run with the Heat, was a really solid player, won, I believe, most improved player of the year and all that kind of stuff. He had a really nice run with the Heat. He's had a very nice career. It's a Hall of Fame career, no, but he's had a very nice, consistent, solid career. A guy who's been able to come off the bench a lot, guy who can start, a guy who can kind of provide many different things to a team. He can provide provide some shooting, could provide some ball handling, some assists and some passing, and, can just provide a much-needed score, just much-needed offensive threat. Another guy you got to look out for, another guy you got to watch out for. And, when he went to the Raptors this season, he only played 5 games, missed a lot of the season, then got traded to the Spurs, gets bought out, and now he's on the Nets. So it's kind of been a wild year for him. It's kind of been something that's definitely been wild, and it's going to take some time, I'm sure, for him to ramp up, given he's only played 5 games this season. It's going to probably be similar to a Ben Simmons situation where it may take him a couple days, a couple practices to really ramp up and really get going, to get back into basketball shape, get back into, get back into the readiness, learn the team, learn what they're preaching, learn what Steve Nash wants him to do. And look, I've always said this, whenever moves happen, you got to take it, some moves as a fan, you kind of got to step away for a second and really look at the move and really dissect the move. Because sometimes as a fan, you see a move go down and everyone just buys into it. Everyone's like, all right, this is a great move. I'll buy into this. I like this. But when you really take a step back and maybe if you look at it and what it helps a team, sometimes you're like, all right, I don't really understand. I don't understand why we made this. I said it yesterday about, Robbie Anderson and the Jets. And I was saying how, yes, maybe some Jet fans see potential in him, and maybe they're like, oh, we need a receiver. But take a step back a second. Is Robbie Anderson really going to help us in terms of providing a true offensive threat? Is he really going to be a guy that Wilson and him connect with? Is he really going to be a guy that's going to get many snaps? Not really. And Dragic here, same thing. You see the move go down, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, all right, we got a veteran guard. We got a guy who can, score a little bit, can dribble, can score, pass a little bit, is an offensive threat. But the biggest thing that I'm most excited about is Goran Dragic. It's not even just his play. It's just the fact that we have finally, since the trade for James Harden, when we got him last season, and we gave up Jared Allen, we gave up Karis LeVert were the main two. We got rid of Prince, got rid of, Krurutz, and I know, or, Rodion's Krurutz, whatever his name was. It was something like that. You had all those guys, right? Krurutz and Prince really weren't that good, but you let up Jared Allen and Karis LeVert, 2 really good pieces, 2 really good guys that were young and developing. And since that, we really haven't had great of a bench. We brought in Bembry, he gets released. We brought in Carter, he now gets released as well, which I'm ecstatic about because nobody in the entire world needs to watch Javon Carter play basketball. That just hurts anybody's eyes, whether you're a Net fan or you're not a Net fan. Nobody in America needs to see Javon Carter play 30 to 35 minutes a night. Nobody needs to see that. He wasn't playing that much, but he was playing, 20, 25, 30 minutes. Nobody in America needs to see that. And we saw it this season, and it hurt a lot. So that fact that he's gone is definitely good. But now we can finally say, prior to the James Harden trade, we had some true depth. We had some true guys, young talent. Now, post-Harden trade, and now that we signed Dragic, and what Dragic brings to the table is a much, much needed bench piece. A much, much needed piece of the bench that the Nets have been missing for a while. A guard that can score, a guard that can pass, a guard that can shoot a little bit, a guard that can, dribble a little bit. He's not going to be a guy, that's going to put up 35 a night, as I've always said. He's not going to be that player. He's never been that player. He's going to have this similar impact to a team that Patty Mills has had. He's a 13 to 14 point per game guy who can come off the bench, play 20 to 25 minutes, give you solid production, and boom, call it a night. Takes a shower, goes home. That's kind of what Goran Dragic brings to the table. And Steve Nash has already built a relationship with him. Steve Nash has already, built a relationship with him when they were playing. So you already kind of know what Steve Nash sees in him, what they're looking for in him. And sometimes those relationships are key. Whether it's player coach, whether they played together, or or maybe he was with him in another stop, whatever it is. Anytime you have a player-coach relationship or a relationship like that where they both kind of see eye to eye and both know what to expect of each other, this is really, that really helps when you bring it onto the court. And that might sound confusing what I just said, but in terms of what Steve Nash wants to implement in the offense, he obviously sees Dragic can fill that need and fill a hole, which is our bench. The Nets bench has been terrible. Kessler Edger's okay. He's all right. He's not great. Nick Claxton's not getting many minutes. Day'Ron Sharp. Those are guys that are young, but they're they're just not pieces that are going to be able to build for a finals. You need guys like Patty Mills coming off the bench. You need guys like Dragic coming off the bench. Even a guy like, LaMarcus Aldridge coming off the bench. And adding Dragic, who's a scorer, who, by the way, Kyrie, who's still only playing home games. Instead of watching Javon Carter try to dribble and shoot so many times, You already add that to a bench with Bruce Brown, Aldridge, and you add that. Now you bring in Dragic, a veteran guard who can score, is something that the Nets have not had all year long and haven't had since we made the trade for James Harden. So is this a move that is going to make, is this a move that's going to, turn Dragic into an all-star player? No. Because he's only going to need to give us 20 to 25 minutes. What the Nets need is 20 to 25 minutes of solid basketball off the bench every night. And Dragic gives you that. And when Kyrie's not in because obviously the COVID, vaccine, when he's not in, he can give you more minutes. And when Kyrie's in, you back him up with Kyrie, Simmons, Seth Curry, all those guys. You already put, all the other guys on the bench like Patty Mills. Who knows what's going to happen with Joe Harris. And now you just have Dragic. And with the uncertainty, like I said, around Joe Harris the rest of the season, you can't, the Nets can't play the card of, let's hope Joe Harris comes back. No. You need to strike a move. You need to make it happen. Because if Joe Harris doesn't come back, Dragic is that much more important. If Harris does come back and he's playing at a high level, well, hey, you got another guard. You got Dragic. It's never bad to have too much depth. I've always said this in sports. It's never bad to have too much depth. And specifically to have veterans in the locker room. I've always said that. I've always said it too in the NFL. It's never bad to have too many offensive line. If you just bring in a bunch of offensive linemen and you just see who's the best out of all of them. I've always said that. It's never a bad thing. It's never a bad thing to have too much depth. Depth is one of those things that when it's not there, you really start to notice it. And the Nets have not had good depth this past season and a half. Now we're going to start to realize what it's like to have a true solid bench rotation with this move of Dragic. And we'll see how long it takes for him to get back in action for a guy who's only played a couple games this season, went to the Spurs, got bought out. And, he wasn't expected to be in San Antonio a long time at all. So, look, he only made 5 appearances this season for the Raptors, and he left the team for a personal matter on November 28th, so hasn't played in a long time, and now he's a Brooklyn Net. You also have Blake Griffin, guys like that. I don't want to see Blake Griffin shooting threes all the time. So a much-needed scoring, thing here. I think this move, too, and I don't want to start rumors. I don't like to do that. But I think this move kind of signals a little bit that the Nets kind of have the feeling of Joe Harris is probably going to be done for the season. Because I think if Joe Harris would have came back, Nets might have wanted to hold back on this. But now that I think Joe Harris, I think this might kind of signal that Joe Harris is probably not going to play another game this season. And I hope I'm wrong. And maybe I am wrong. But that's kind of just what I see from this. And, comment down below maybe if you think the same thing, with this signing. But look, what the Nets are getting is a much-needed depth piece. A scorer, a guy who can shoot, guy who can, ball handle a little bit, pass, assist. Throughout his career, he's, 13, 14-point guy, give you 20 to 25 solid minutes a night, and boom. The Nets get something that it was much, much needed for a very, very long time. So Goran Dragic to sign with Nets after contract buyout from Spurs. Veteran guard Goran Dragic agreed to a deal with the Brooklyn Nets according to Shams of The Athletic and Stadium. Ahead of the trade deadline, the Toronto Raptors sent Dragic to the San Antonio Spurs in a deal for Thaddeus Young. ESPN's Woj reported his time in San Antonio wasn't expected to be long, with the Spurs likely to buy him out of his remaining contract. Dragic originally landed with the Raptors as a part of the Miami Heat sign-and trade for Kyle Lowry. Many believed his time with Toronto would be a marriage of convenience, with the team moving him on at a later date. The 35-year-old only made 5 appearances for the Raptors, averaging 8 points, 1.8 assists. He last played in a 127-121 loss to the Detroit Pistons on November 13th, finishing with 16 points, 5 rebounds, and 3 assists. So, hasn't played since November 13th. So that's been a while. It's been really since the beginning of the season. On November 28th, Dragic left the team for a personal matter. GM Bobby Webster said he had the full support of the Raptors, and there was no definite date for his return to the squad. Every year, contending teams turn into the buyout market to make their final improvements after the trade deadline. Occasionally, a marquee name such as Blake Griffin becomes available, which renews the discourse about whether buyouts are another mechanism for rich to get richer. But in reality, buyouts are rarely the thing that puts a franchise over the top in the championship race. It's the truth. If you actually look at it over the years, all of the buyouts to sign with like a big name team, there's only been like 5 to 10 of them that have really made a huge impact. I don't know. Was Ray Allen? I don't think Ray Allen was. I forget. I know the Spurs. There's a couple buyouts over the years that have made like huge impacts and have gone on to do great things, but there's not many of them. Realistically, the buyout market, like Blake Griffin, sure he's a marquee name, but he's not the same player he once was. And he's just not. And we saw it with the Pistons, and we see it again here. If he was the same player he once was, he would have never got bought out. Last year, Griffin couldn't lift Brooklyn out of the conference semifinals, while signing Andre Drummond didn't help the Los Angeles Lakers get out of the first round. In the case of Dragic, Nets fans shouldn't expect to get the player who made the 2017-2018 All-Star team. Like I said, he's not gonna be a guy that's gonna put up big numbers and make a huge impact, but he's gonna give us depth and give us points when we need them. The Slovenian playmaker was solid for the Heat last season, averaging 13.4 points per game, 4.4 assists, while shooting 43.2% from the field and 37.3% beyond the arc. But there's a reason why Miami prioritized the addition of Lowry. Exchange for Dragic for Lowry seems to be working out nicely for the Heat, who are currently first in the Eastern Conference at 38-21. For his career, Dragic is averaging twice as many assists, 4.8, as turnovers, 2.3, and he's a good enough shooter, 36.4 on three-pointers, to keep opposing defenses honest. He's also well-versed in playoff basketball, having appeared in 56 postseason games with the Heat and the Phoenix Suns. So he's been in a lot of games. He has a lot of experience. The Athletic's John Hollinger wrote that Dragic showed some slippage last season, but his pick-and-roll game and off-ball shooting skills should at least qualify him as a solid backup option. That's what I'm saying. He's a solid bench option. Teams can never have too much depth at this stage of the season, and there weren't many better options for Brooklyn to shore up its guard rotation for the stretch run. Trading James Harden to the 76ers for Ben Simmons was justifiable given how he clearly wanted out as the deadline approached. However, the Nets were getting Simmons without a clear picture of when he'd be able to play and perform at his peak. In Dragic, Brooklyn now has another ball handler who can ease the burden on Kyrie Irving and serve as a bit of a stopgap, with the uncertainty still hovering over Simmons' status. Now, Simmons should return shortly. This is a report that came out today. Simmons' debut getting close. Newest star really ramp up, and it will be weeks rather than months. So probably only a week. I've said this a couple times, and I said it a couple weeks ago. I think I still said it when Harden was here. Maybe I don't know if I said it when Harden was here or it was after the trade, but I did say this. Like, all of them are going to come back at once. Like, Simmons is going to come back and Durant are going to come back at once. And maybe Kyrie becomes a full-time player all at once. And it's just going to be like all in, full-blown, head down, and just push towards the finish. Maybe that's what they do. That was the one thing I did say the one day. I don't know if I said it before the trade deadline or after, but I could still see it happening. Like where they all just come in at once and it's just like, beating opponents left and right. And it's like, that's the Nets we need. So, just to give you some more stats on Goran Dragic, go a little deeper into his career. Like I said, this season he only played 5 games. Had a cup of coffee with the Raptors and the Spurs. If you even want to call it a cup of coffee with the Spurs, he kind of walked in and walked out. What is that? What is that one meme? It's the Peter Griffin meme, I think, where he just walks in and it walks out. That was kind of his time with the Spurs. But in his career, he's played 172 games. He started 524 of them, so he has experience coming off the bench. He averages only about 28 minutes a night in his career. So a guy who doesn't play big minutes. The most minutes he's played in a single season was 35.1 back in 2013-2014 with the Suns. That season, he also started 75 of the 76 games. So a guy who, at this stage in his career, he's a 25 to 27 minute type game guy. His field goal percentage for his career is a career 46.2% shooter, so really solid from the field. 3-point percentage, 36.4, not as great, but still, can shoot, can stretch it a little bit. Free throw percentage, 76.7, doesn't get to the line a whole lot, only about 3 times a game, so not a guy who gets to the line a whole lot. His assists per game in his career, 4.8. And he averages for his career 13.9 points per game, which is what I said. He averaged, 13.9 rounded up to 14. So he's a guy that in his career puts about 5 assists out there a night, about 3 rebounds. He's about 5 assists, 3 rebounds, and about 14 points. And that's the production you'll probably get. 13 to 14 points, 5-6 assists, 2 to 3 rebounds, coming off the bench, 25 to 27 minutes, and a solid addition for the Brooklyn Nets. And he is 35, and he's been in postseason games. And if you look at his, I'm sure you can look at his postseason stats, which I'm not going to do because, okay, here we go. I actually am going to do it. So his postseason stats, in his career, he's played 56 postseason games. Field goal percentage up to 44.2, three-point 34.6, and his points per game is 14.9. So he's actually better in points per game in the postseason. So he also has experience there as well. So Nets signed Goran Dragic for the rest of the season. And, I mean, who knows? I mean, a guy who, maybe for Dragic, very well could be his final team. He is 35, so he's getting to the towards the tail end of his career. He's never won a championship. Although he's played 56 playoff games, he's never won a championship. His three main awards were an All-Star, All-NBA third team, and Most Improved Player. So those were his main awards. He's never won a championship. He got to the playoffs a couple times with the Heat and the Suns. 56 times, it's not a few, but, 56 times, 56 games played in the postseason, but he's never won a championship. So who knows? This could be something for Dragic too. Go all out, play as hard as you can. You win a championship, you retire, and you go off into the sunset having a solid career. So nice little addition for the Nets and boost up the bench and kind of, now this is the roster you're looking at with the Nets. Your starting lineup's more than likely going to be Ben Simmons, KD, Kyrie Irving, Seth Curry, and Andre Drummond. And you're looking now at your bench, it's going to be guys like Griffin, Griffin. Now you add Dragic. You already have Claxton and Bruce Brown and guys like that. But now and you lose Juwan Howard as well, who gets released. Who, by the way, was, oh my God, he was bad. There's always that player. Every team, I feel like every team has it where they continue to get minutes. It's not even just like it's in sports in general. It's like last season was the same thing with the Rangers. What was it? Jack Johnson, I think his name was, or something. He was terrible, and yet David Quinn kept on playing him. And I was like, oh my gosh, why? Same thing with Juwan Howard. Like, the guy was awful, and they kept on playing him. There's so many players I can name. It's almost like the Jets. Chuma Edoga, their offensive line. He's terrible, but yet he's back every single season. I don't understand. He's awful, but he's back every single year. And I'm like, what? So, Juwan Howard's gone. Goran Dragic in. Solid move for the Nets. Comment down below your thoughts on the move and what type of impact it will have on the Brooklyn Nets moving forward. Alrighty, so with all that being said, that's what I got for the Nets and the signing of Goran Dragic. Nets will be back in action Thursday night at Barclays against the Celtics. And by the way, the schedule coming out of the Nets for the All-Star break is definitely tough. You got the Celtics, the Bucks, Raptors back. Got the Raptors two games in a row. Celtics again, Hornets, 76ers, Knicks, and then it gets a little looser with the Magic, Mavericks, Trailblazers. So you then get a couple games there where you can win. So it's definitely a little bit of a tough stretch early. You get a good young Hornets team. You obviously got that Sixers game that everyone's looking at. Raptors aren't great, but still, I mean, it's still going to be, back, you're playing the team twice, so, it's always hard to beat a team twice, and it's a home and away. They're beatable, but then you have the Celtics, Bucks, and you have the Heat, Celtics again, Hornets, Sixers, so definitely a little bit of a tough stretch coming out of the break, so definitely a team that needs some wins early on, and right now the Nets are the 8 seed, 31-28, and they're 7 games back from being the 1 seed again in the Eastern Conference. Alrighty, so that's what I got for the Nets there. And coming up next, I'm going to get to another basketball topic, this time a little bit of college basketball. We had the wildness, craziness strike between between Michigan and Wisconsin, and Juwan Howard hit another coach in the face. And he has now been suspended for the rest of the regular season. I'm going to tell you what I think about this suspension, if I think it was the right amount of time, and kind of just get into the whole incident because I wasn't able to talk about it yesterday. So kind of get into the whole incident today and what this means for Michigan and Juwan Howard moving forward. We'll get to that and much more coming up next. All right, so welcome me back here up at the BSN Network podcast here today, Tuesday, February 22nd. It is the second month, February 22nd, and the 2022. So a lot of twos today, and the quarterback for the Jets, Zach Wilson, number 2 as well. So I've been going around telling people all that today just to, continue to talk about my sports teams, and I'll continue to tell people that. Either way, Over the weekend, had something pretty wild happen in college basketball, and I wasn't able to talk about this yesterday, or I could have talked about it yesterday, but I chose not to because I figured suspensions were coming. So I figured might as well talk about the whole situation plus his suspension when everything happens instead of talking about it yesterday and then a suspension happening and then talking about it 2 days in a row just wouldn't have made sense. So I was waiting for a suspension to happen, and last night it became official. It was obvious. I think we were all just wondering at that point the amount of time he was going to get. Was he going to get fired? Was it going to be for the regular season? Was it going to be for 3 games? Was it going to be for the rest of the season, including Big Ten tournament, and if they find a way to squeak in as like a last-minute bid into the March Madness? It was kind of just a timetable. It was really just a timetable of how long Juwan Howard was going to be suspended, and if it was going to get real bad, was he even going to be the coach for Michigan for much longer? But over the weekend, craziness struck. Michigan's Juwan Howard suspended for the rest of the regular season after fight. So... I always find this funny, though, because whenever you talk about this stuff, and this happens sometimes in sports, I mean, you see it a lot of times, you see it sometimes, not a lot of times, but we've seen it before where coaches will get into fights. You see it in the NFL sometimes, players will get into fights. There's always little fights and beefs and suspensions get handed out. This is not the first time we've seen this in sports. This is definitely probably not the last, but I've always found it funny because, now we're talking about fighting. We're talking about punches being thrown and guys getting suspended. And it's like, here's hockey, on the other hand, where guys are pushing and shoving and fighting each other, and it's the part of the sport. I've always found that funny. And that's what makes hockey so unique from all the other sports. Is look at a bench-clearing brawl in baseball. Some of those guys are suspended for a week. Some of those guys are suspended for 5 to 10 games. I mean, if you throw at a guy in baseball, you could be suspended for a game or 2. And just that in itself, you throw behind a guy, you could get suspended for a game. In hockey, if you target a guy and hit him against the boards with a real big hit, you're back there the next night and you're playing hockey again. So that's always what separates. But over the weekend was completely inexcusable. And I don't know if you saw the game. I got to be honest, I did not see it live. I saw the highlights. My phone blew up after it happened. I first saw, Michigan-Wisconsin fight, and I was like, oh gosh, what happened here? Anytime a Big Ten rivalry fight happens, it's like, all right, let's see what happens. And then I saw Juwan Howard getting into it and stuff like that. So really was an ugly scene. And anytime you see a fight other than hockey, and in hockey actually sometimes too, we've seen players. I mean, last season we saw Tom Wilson get suspended. We've seen him get suspended a lot. We've seen Marchand get suspended sometimes for just, illegal stuff that, hockey you can't completely tackle a guy and punch him just because, it's got to be, you can't just target a guy and give him a legal hit. There is still rules in hockey. It's not like you could just go around punching people all the time. But over the weekend, like I said, was completely inexcusable and kind of just specifically, to kind of just back, get really to the point now and really take a deep dive into what happened on Sunday between Michigan and Wisconsin was, it was actually a pretty good game to start. I believe it was tied going into halftime. I think it was like 31-31 or something. It was tied, and then it was 77-63. And with about 15 seconds left. So, and this is what frustrates me, is because Juwan Howard did the exact same thing earlier in the season. I'll get to it in a second. If I want to try to take this down step by step and kind of just give you my thoughts on everything that happened. Juwan Howard did do the same thing early in the season. And I'm going to get to that a little later on, if I remember, we'll see how everything goes. But, it was actually a pretty good game to start, Wisconsin, Michigan. And a Michigan team this season that has been underwhelming. After last season, they had a solid year. Year before that, Juwan Howard did really good. This year has been underwhelming. They had some nice wins early in the season and some bad losses, too. It's kind of just been an up and down year for Michigan, a year where there's been just some bad losses. There's been some good wins. It's just been a year full of consistency, and the record kind of shows it. They're 14-11. Now, are they terrible? No. But are they beatable? Yes. But are they a team that can really pull off some good wins? Yeah. And we saw them go go face to face, and it was close going into halftime against a really good Wisconsin team. And we've also seen them get crushed and look embarrassed, and we've seen them beat really good teams like Indiana by double-digit points, an Indiana team that's a really solid under-the-radar team going into March. So it's kind of been a very weird year for Michigan in terms of how to properly gauge them. Now, after this act from after what happened on Sunday from Juwan Howard and how the season has all played out, I don't think Michigan gets into the March Madness unless if obviously they win the Big Ten tournament, which the likelihood of that is very low. And if they win out, they obviously get an automatic bid. I don't think they get in. Now, if they don't get in, is it because Juwan Howard? I don't think that's because of it. They're also 14-11, and they've had some bad losses, and another bad loss this weekend against Wisconsin, losing by 14. So it was 77-63 with about 15 seconds left, or I believe it was like 77-63. Only with a couple seconds left. Now it was 15 seconds left on the clock, and pretty much, there's always that old rule of, the unwritten rules. We always talk about the unwritten rules in baseball. It's kind of like an unwritten rules thing. Should you be swinging at a 3-0 pitch in baseball? Some people say, oh, no, it's not okay. Some people say, oh, yeah, swing away. It's almost like, in football, we see it, if you're crushing a team, should you really, it's all those unwritten rules. Same thing in we see it now in basketball too. Calling timeouts when you're winning by double digits with 15 seconds to go. Is that really necessary? It's all about the unwritten rule stuff, which I don't like the unwritten rules. I don't like when people bring up, oh, it's so unsportsmanlike. It's like, you're in the game, you're playing a game, you play until it hits triple zeros. You've always heard coaches say that every single year. It's always, you got to play for the full 40 minutes. You don't play for 39 minutes, and in the final minute, you say, oh, we're winning by a lot, let's give up. I know they bring in their backups and stuff, but those backups, too, are trying to play hard and do the best they can. And that's what the Wisconsin coach pretty much said, Greg Gard, is the reason he was calling a timeout, which, by the way, he called a timeout. It was about 15 seconds left, and there was only 4 seconds left on the shot clock. And Michigan, by the way, which Juwan Howard went into his press conference and said, oh, I was not full court pressing. Meanwhile, he was full court pressing. Wisconsin called a timeout to reset the clock, so they had 10 seconds to advance the ball. And Greg Gard pretty much just didn't want his young guys, his bench players, to get put into the situation where they got to rush, maybe have a turnover. Because look, those are guys that don't get many playing time. Those are guys that don't always get the opportunity. So when they're in there, you want to give them the best opportunity possible. You don't want to give them 4 seconds when a team's pressing to advance the ball up court and maybe have it sloppy and make a bad play and, really bring down their confidence and really mess them up just in terms of strategy. You also want to see what they can do in certain situations. I have no issue. As a fan, I have no issue with them calling a timeout. Juwan Howard did, and that's where things got really wild. And Juwan Howard, by the way, before I get into what happened in the handshake line, did the same exact thing early in the season. 55 seconds to go. It was Michigan-Indiana earlier in the year. They were winning 78-62 with 55 seconds to go, and he called a timeout. So Juwan Howard, now it wasn't 15, but he called a timeout under a minute to go. So for Juwan Howard going into his post-game press conference, number one, saying that he wasn't full court pressing, which, by the way, is completely false, because if you look at the picture, he was full court pressing. Number two, to do that earlier in the season and be okay with it, and the Indiana coach having no problem with it, and then to have it happen to you later in the season, it's like, okay, you did it too. Now you're, someone's doing it back to you. No need to get up. You did the same thing earlier in the season. I don't want to hear, it was a 55 seconds left. You were winning by double digits with 55 seconds left. If Juwan Howard finds that's not okay, then he should have never called a timeout early in the season. He did the same exact thing earlier in the year. And now it's happening to him, and now he's not okay with it. And in the handshake line, Juwan Howard, first of all, was never okay. He was not okay, first of all, going into the handshake line. He was not first. Usually it's head coach that goes first. Greg Gard was handshaking, players were going, and then Juwan Howard goes up and is talking to him and is yelling at him. And I know people are like, oh, Greg Gard put his hands on him first and all that stuff. And listen, yeah, because Juwan Howard was yelling at him. And Greg Gard's trying to tell him, look, I didn't mean it that way. I wanted to put my guys in a best situation. I wanted to help my guys out. I didn't want my guys to be full court pressure, 4 seconds left on the clock to get it over half court. That's not what he wanted to do. It wasn't about trying to score more points. It wasn't about doing all this other stuff. It wasn't about trying to run up the score. It was just about putting his guys in the best situation to succeed with 15 seconds left. It wasn't about trying to make a game that was already blowout, make it a 25-point game. That's not what it was about. It's not like he called a timeout with 3 seconds left so he could throw an alley-oop, so he could run a set play for his guys to score again. That's not what he was trying to do. And Juwan Howard gets angry, yelling at him, and then it kind of gets into a scrum, and Juwan Howard then takes his hand, and it wasn't a punch. I will admit, it was not a punch. But his hand was like this, and he kind of just took it and hit another guy in the face, hit an assistant in the face. And that's unacceptable. That can't happen. And for a guy that talks about, Michigan man, and for a guy that talks so much about, being the right character, when you build a foundation, when you're building a program, when you're helping a team, when you're trying to win, you need to have high character guys. And what Juwan Howard did was the complete opposite of what he preaches. That was take his hand and completely whack it across the guy's face over some timeout that was called with 15 seconds left that realistically is not that big of a deal when you look at the big picture. So Howard suspended the rest of the regular season. And I know there's some people out there that believe he should be fired. Now, I was listening to WFAN yesterday, and Evan Roberts, who does a great job, Carton and Roberts. WFAN's awesome. I listen to all the shows. Boomer and Gio in the morning, I'll listen to Tiki and Tierney, I'll listen to Craig, Carton and Roberts with Craig Carton and Evan Roberts. And Evan Roberts yesterday on WFAN brought up a great point. And I kind of agreed with him. And I'm going to use kind of what he said a little bit here, paraphrase a little bit about what he said. Like, I don't now... If you want to say he can get fired, get fired. Now, to be honest with you, he's not going to get fired. Now, Michigan's not having a great year anyway. So, if he gets fired at the end of the year because they played bad, that's because they played bad. So there is always kind of that suspicion of fire him anyway. They're not playing good. They're having a bad year. Now this is just another reason. Get rid of him. It's kind of one of those things. But he did release a statement today, which, we always know. We don't know how true it is. We don't know how real it is, if it's truly coming from a guy who's truly sorry, or if it's coming from a guy who, whatever it is. Sometimes, they always got to release a statement, or sometimes they'll be like, oh, I'm sorry, this and that. So, at least he released a statement. But what Evan Roberts yesterday was saying on WFAN is that if he never released a statement and he just let it as is and he went on and got suspended and never said anything and still stood by his point of, oh, I was upset and all that by them calling a timeout, then he should have got fired. Then you get fired. Because then that's just poor. Then that's just strictly giving Michigan a bad look, giving the program a bad look, and that could hurt recruits further down the road of who they truly want to play for. So he did it. He did express apology. He did send out an apology. But if he never did that, then I would stand on the side of should have got fired. But he did release a statement. I think it was a fine statement. I don't think he took his time with it. I mean, who knows if he's being true with it? Who knows if somebody told him to say it? Who knows if he did that on his own? Whatever it is, he released a statement. So for that reason, no, he shouldn't get fired. You can still stand by he gets fired. I wouldn't strongly disagree with you. I can see both sides of it. I mean, he took his hand and hit a guy in the face. As a coach, that's unacceptable. I mean, just imagine if Nick Saban did that. The roar of if Nick Saban did that, just imagine what would happen. So if you believe he gets fired, I can see where you're coming from. If you believe he doesn't get fired, I can see where you're coming from. That's where I kind of stand in the middle. Now, I do agree with the suspension they gave him. They're suspending him for the rest of the season. The rest of the regular season, I apologize. So, for the final 5 games I believe they got coming up, which will start tomorrow night against Rutgers, which is home, he won't be coaching. And the earliest he can return is Big Ten tournament. And if they win out, then the March Madness and all that stuff, which I don't believe is going to happen. But this just puts the team in a bad spot, because for a Michigan team that was already struggling, was already on the cusp of having to win out in the Big Ten tournament, now really has to win out. And now they got to do it without some of their key players, without their head coach now. Not only did this just affect the program as a whole and the look on the program, but it also just affects the team right now. Because now you're without your coach. Some key players threw some punches as well. And when you need to win games desperately, when you need wins in order to try and convince the committee that you deserve to be one of those last 4 teams in the tournament, to now have this happen to you, not a good look. And now they got to find a way to win the rest of the regular season without their head coach. So we'll see how it goes. But for a Michigan team, just again, it's been a weird year for Michigan. It's been a very weird year. It's been a very weird season for them, where they've had some moments of, wow, this team can play, and they've had some moments where it's like, oh my gosh, how is this team, what's going on with this team? And to prove that to you, just to show you some of the wins they had earlier in the season. or they were able to, they lost to North Carolina, but then they were able to beat some, crush some teams, and they lost to, had some bad losses to Rutgers, and they lose to Illinois, and then they beat, teams like Maryland, and they crushed a feisty team in Indiana. And then you have some bad losses where you lose to Purdue, and then then you beat Purdue. And then you lose to Ohio State. You beat number 25 Iowa. It's like they win a good game, then they lose. They win, then they lose. So it's like they've had some nice wins and they've had some really bad losses. This does not help them. So for the final 5 games coming up, which is at home against Rutgers, at home against Illinois, home against Michigan State. So 4 of their final 5 games are at home. Home against Rutgers, home against Illinois, home against Michigan State, home against Iowa, and it'll be on the road to finish off the season March 6th against Ohio State, and in Big Ten tournament will be shortly after that. So Michigan's Juwan Howard suspended for the rest of the regular season after fight. The Big Ten Conference announced Monday that the University of Michigan men's basketball head coach Juwan Howard has been suspended for the remainder of the regular season for his role in the skirmish following Sunday's 77-63 loss to Wisconsin. Dan Wetzel of Yahoo Sports broke the news earlier Monday. Michigan has 5 regular season games left before the Big Ten tournament. Howard was also fined $40,000. These are some of the players that got impacted as well. So Michigan forwards Terrence Williams II, Musa Diabete were each suspended 1 game for their roles in the altercation, and was Wisconsin's guard Jacoby Neath. So all those guys got suspended 1 game. So now again, another some pieces to the roster that are, nice pieces, nice guys that contribute are now out. And sure, it's only 1 game, but for a Michigan team that's desperate and needs wins, I mean, it's definitely tough. So Wisconsin head coach Greg Gard was not suspended, but he was fined $10,000. Badgers director of athletics Chris McIntosh said in a statement that the school would cover the fine, as he views it as Wisconsin fine and not a Greg Gard fine. Badgers assistant Joe Krabinoff was not disciplined. Howard and Gard started yelling at each other in the handshake line before players and assistants came to separate them. It was then that Howard reached across and physically struck Krabinoff. Now, the coach that got hit did not get suspended, and rightfully so, he didn't do anything. He got hit, so I mean he wasn't really supposed to do anything. He was kind of defenseless. That escalated tension led to a scrum, pushing players. The Big Ten released a statement in the aftermath and it said it was aware of the physical altercation involving Howard and was in contact with both member institutions and is currently assessing the incident. The Associated Press via ESPN noted Wisconsin called a timeout 15 seconds left despite enjoying a healthy lead, which angered Howard. Juwan Howard went on to say this: "I didn't like the timeout being called, to be totally honest. I thought it was not necessary at the moment, especially being a large lead." Howard did apologize Monday for his unacceptable actions and words. So this is what Howard said. He released a statement yesterday. This is what it said. Let me get this back up here. Kicked me out. So this is what Juwan Howard said in a statement. Let me see. I gotta zoom in. He said, after taking time to reflect on all that happened, I realized how unacceptable both my actions and words were, and how they affected so many. I am truly sorry. I'm offering my sincerest apologies to my players and their families, my staff, my families, and the Michigan fans around the world. I would like to personally apologize to Wisconsin's assistant coach Joe Krabinoff and his family too. Lastly, I speak a lot about being a Michigan man and representing the University of Michigan with class and pride. I did not do that, nor did I set the right example in the right way for my student athletes. I will learn from my mistake, and this mistake will never happen again. No excuses. So that's what he said, and it's the truth. I mean, he talks a lot about pride. He talks a lot about being a Michigan Wolverine. Talks a lot about building a program, building with the right character guys. Doing that, not a good look. Alrighty, and then McIntosh and some members of his team staffs were affected and injured. McIntosh also said he contacted Big Ten Commissioner Kevin Warren and added, "There's no room, no space for contact like that in any competition, much less the Big Ten competition. The Big Ten takes pride in sportsmanship. The Big Ten takes pride in acting with class. That didn't happen today." Guard discussed the incident after the game, and then kind of just to read, final couple paragraphs. That's a video if you want to watch it. It's on CBS Sports HQ Twitter. On the court, the Badgers improved to 21-5 overall and 12-4 in conference play with the win. All 5 Wisconsin starters scored in double figures, including Johnny Davis, who led the way with 25 points and 6 boards. Hunter Dickinson's 21 points were not enough for the Wolverines, who are firmly on the NCAA tournament bubble heading into the season's stretch run after the latest dropped them to 14-11 overall and 8-7 in the Big Ten. And now a suspension to your coach and 2 key players doesn't help them. So we'll see if they can find a way in these final 5 games. Sometimes maybe this rallies a team. Maybe this does rally a team, and maybe they win, go 3-2 in their final 5. Now, I would have to assume in order for the Michigan, just to go to like an actual play standpoint, if Michigan does, and I don't know who's being elevated as coach, it might be out there, I just don't know. Probably one of his assistants, or definitely going to be an assistant of some sort. Their schedule coming up is not great. They are home for 4 of the final 5, so that does help. It's not like they have to go to Illinois. It's not like they have to go to Iowa. They do have to go to Ohio State. They have a Rutgers team tomorrow night, which is going to be easy. Rutgers is a very good team. Is Rutgers beatable? Yeah. They lost to Rutgers early in the season, so it'd be interesting to see how they go, to see how they do there. But they have Rutgers tomorrow night. And a Rutgers team that did lose against Purdue over the weekend, but still a very hot team, winning 4 of their last 5, and have proven that they can beat really good competition and beat Wisconsin on the road, and which Michigan lost to on the road, and they've already lost to Rutgers. So not really the matchup's not favoring them there. Now, you do have Illinois at home, which isn't going to be easy, but you're at home. So in order for them to really get a chance to really make an impact and win and get into the March Madness, they're going to have to find a way to beat either Illinois, Iowa, or Ohio State, or at least 2 of the 3 of them. Because beating Rutgers and Michigan State, although that might look nice, it's not going to be as great on the resume as beating an Illinois or going on the road and beating Ohio State or beating a feisty Iowa team. So, they got their hands full, final 5 games, and they're 14-11. So if they go 2-3 in their final 5 games, they would be 15-14, and that would mean what, like 9-9 would it be? 9-10, I guess, in Big Ten play to finish it out. If they go 2-3 in their final 14 games, they would be 16-14, and they would finish 9-10 in Big Ten play. That's not good enough. If they go 3-2, 3-2 would be, I apologize, that would be 2-3. They go 3-2, it'd be like 17-13, and they'd be like that'd be like 11-10 in Big Ten play, or something like that. So. Yeah. And if they go, let's say they went 5-0, they would be 19-11, and they would be 13-7. So that would be probably good enough to get them in. But they put themselves in a situation. So we'll see how it all plays out. Comment down below if you agree on the suspension and Juwan Howard. So next time Howard can coach is in the Big Ten tournament, and if they move any further than that, which we'll see how everything goes. Alrighty, so with all that being said, let's get to the update here. New York Sports Update, college basketball, NHL, to finish off the podcast here on this Tuesday. Got a couple things to get to today. We got Arkansas, Florida. I'll give Arkansas the win. Michigan State, Iowa. I'll give Iowa the win. Tennessee, Missouri. Give me Tennessee. Texas Tech, Oklahoma, I'll take Texas Tech. Villanova, UConn, give me Villanova. Alabama, Vanderbilt, I'll take Alabama. And Kansas State, Kansas, I'll take Kansas. And as for the NHL, there's a couple games on tonight. There's 6 games on tonight. Flyers, Blues, I'll give the Blues the win. Maple Leafs, Blue Jackets, I'll take the Maple Leafs. Panthers, Predators, I'll take Panthers. Wild, Senators, I'll take the Senators. Islanders, Kraken, I will take the Islanders here. Kraken second off a back-to-back. Tough loss last night against the Canucks. Give me the Islanders. I could see them coming out a little bit of fire maybe after a tough loss to the Canadiens at home. And now Ducks, Sharks, I'll take the Ducks. And yeah, that will do it. So let's see. Tomorrow I want to get to some. Tomorrow I want to get to. There's a lot of stuff. I want to get to some. I definitely want to get to some of the Ben Simmons stuff. I want to talk about Paul O'Neill and his jersey retirement. Don't think I forgot about that. I want to talk about Paul O'Neill and his jersey retirement. There's a lot. So I'll figure out what I'm going to get to. I know there's the Rodgers stuff with him posting that thing. I don't even know if I want to talk about that. I don't even know what I'm going to say. I'm going to probably say the same stuff I said all last year. It's just drama at this point. I don't believe anything until I see it. Until I see him get traded, then I'll talk about Rodgers. So, we'll see. But that will do it for another episode of the podcast. And, as always, I'll see you all back here tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.